Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of whatever we're calling this podcast, our Splatting League podcast. I've got James and Nabil with me, not as always, but as usual. How you guys doing?
God, what an opening.
Hey, I said we were doing it live.
Super live. Maybe we're just giddy after the Niners win.
I think so. I know I am.
James, it's the only reason we actually got together on a Wednesday instead of making it last minute because we're actually happy.
Yeah, it snapped maybe not a super long losing streak, but a streak of looking bad, even if they did win a game or two in there. Anyway, yeah, James, what's going on with you?
I feel like that's a targeted question. Happy for the Niners win. Not happy about fantasy. The Mahomes trade just at the worst possible time.
Yeah. Or the best. I think the turn has come.
It's time for a captain's only meeting. We got to right the ship for the playoff push.
Yeah, a little bit of a rough finish for you against Nabil but last week. Nabil, congrats on getting the win in the Inter podcast battle, trying to make it 2 in a row this week. But we've got bigger plans. In fact, I do want to go into our matchup pretty soon there, but I feel like we should at least give the Niners as much time as we did last time, which was all of 30 seconds. But I just want to lead by it was just fun seeing the team play well on all 3 phases of the game, like win or lose. It happened to be against a good team who is now struggling according to all the experts because they lost 2 in a row. It just was like this. That wasn't anything that I hadn't been expecting from the team, right? Like that was just like, yeah, like they put together a good win against a team who, like, it was a good game plan and they won. Like it just felt good to be able to watch that as a Niners fan, right? Like, or is there anything else that we need to add?
I mean, I'm going to be a little skeptical on one thing. Yes, they look good. They put together, like, our running game looks great. Offense looked like it was finally clicking. Kittle looks great and seems like that kind of rekindled everything. But the only skepticism is the Rams have looked bad for 2 weeks in a row where something offensively in the passing game is way off. That's all we can leave it at if we want. But that's the second game where I think Stafford looked nothing like the beginning of the season. I don't know if there's O-line issues. I don't pay attention to the Rams. I'm just glad we got the dub.
Yeah. James?
Yeah, it seemed like there were so many like third down drops on just like open receivers. So it'd be interesting to see what the game looked like without those. I think also it's kind of, if they didn't win this week, I think Trey Lance starts next week and Jimmy re-secured his job for the rest of the year. Like, that's a statement game for him. And I think he is now the starter until we're like out of playoff contention.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, we're half a game behind the last wild card spot. You're not going to get the 1 seed. So at that point, you got to win 3 football games to make a Super Bowl either way. So every playoffs, as much as it is nice to be at home and not for travel, you still got to win 3 games, get in the dance, and you're good. I see your point too, Nabil, though. Like the Rams look bad twice in a row, but hey, you only got to play 1 team at a time, and the Niners were the better team on the football field on Monday, which was the first time in a while that we could say that. So that was nice. Let's talk about this matchup, though, Nabil. In fact, you know what? I think I'm going to go third party. James, what are you? What are your thoughts on the matchup between myself and Nabil?
I think it's going to be exciting. It's like the head-to-head of guys who've made moves for a playoff push. You've got a lot of new faces on both teams. Davante Adams, Kittle against Mahomes, Pitts. I hate to say it, but I'm pretty afraid of Nabil's roster at this point with Dalvin Cook and Eckler both looking healthy. Mahomes potentially figuring things out. But I really hope you beat him because I don't want him to go 2-0 against both of us.
Nabil, your thoughts on how the matchup's shaking out?
Actually, so I had looked at it yesterday. Just obviously, this is before you made your trade for Kittle, which I'll applaud you for fully committing to this season, and hopefully I can rain on your parade a little bit this week. But I would say that I have some concerns on my team as far as over projections. The Jamar Chase at 17 is, I think they're really banking on a touchdown in there. And I think if you look at his splits, the games that are still double digit, a lot of them have incorporated a touchdown. So if that just doesn't come to, fruition, then I could be screwed there, because that's 17 points, putting up nearly the same numbers as Eckler and Cook. Eckler's, I think he's a great back. That's another running back who has been inconsistent. Cook looked fine. Maybe he heard how you were kind of doubting him this weekend about maybe you get it in his mind, but alternatively, maybe it getting out there and him being ahead of it allowed him to focus, like you said too. So I can only hope that he continues to hit these projections. I wouldn't be surprised if we both kind of end up closer to the 120s. This year more than ever, projections just seem so inflated. But I think with so many players having those like 1 or 2 weeks of just complete explosions, like Yahoo's just like, well, we get so many complaints for being under projected or something. I don't know. But I mean, I'm feeling pretty good. James touched on it. I've felt this way for a while, that I do think I have a very solid team. And I feel like I have for most of the season. I just could not nail a goddamn quarterback pick. And it's not for a lack of like trying, or the fact that like there's plenty of quarterbacks out there that can give you 18 points that you need. And I missed so many of them. So hopefully Mahomes the Chiefs seem to have figured it out. It looked like they did. It was an easier team they played, but
I think
one can hope that a Dallas shootout is what I get.
Imagine that sentence at the beginning of the season. Hopefully I've locked in the QB position with Mahomes, but we'll see at this point in the season.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like that is not something I would have thought to be happening. I mean, obviously I picked Ryan to be my Splatty Bowl winner at the beginning of the year. I thought he had the best roster, but I feel like at this point Nabil's roster might be the best, simply because you've got 3 legit starting like RB1s, which wasn't necessarily what everyone thought was going to happen with both Fournette or Eckler maybe, and like Cook is like now healthy, like just probably the most robust lineup. I will say the world is finally getting that Rodgers Mahomes matchup that we missed two times, not just because Aaron Rodgers missed a real football game, but way back in week 1 when I played Ryan, I actually started Russell Wilson in that game against Mahomes. So the world, or at least the Splatty League world, is finally getting Mahomes versus Rodgers, fitting that it's in a game that's pretty pivotal for playoff positioning. But yeah, I will say this. I'm kind of pissed that I have to play Mahomes a second time. Like, it sucks. It fucking sucks. I mean, like, it would have had to happen if, Ryan's team had been good anyway, but it's like, oh, Ryan's kind of sucking. He's selling his pieces like towards the end of the season, and it ends up going like not to someone within my division, but still just like on a roster I haven't played yet. Because in week 1, he still, he put up 33.28, which he didn't match until last week. And it's like, oh, great, perfect. Yeah, of course. Mahomes is looking good right as he's about to play me. Now he's on a playoff team. But yeah, so Rodgers Mahomes could be the big difference. I'm really excited about having the Adams Rodgers stack. I know Rodgers did look sluggish post-COVID. Something tells me there's no way that he actually had his like tests clear at the right time or whatever, he was probably still struggling with post-COVID. But a full week later against Minnesota, I don't see Rodgers having another bad game. So I'm excited for him to be able to hopefully compete with Mahomes. But that Kansas City Dallas game could be a shootout too. So should be a lot of fireworks between you and me, Nabil.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting you're mentioning divisions, and we talked about like what the future divisions are moving forward. And I just was peeking over at how the standings are. I'm 0-3 against my division. So like it's just funny to kind of look. And you were talking about you're like, oh, looking forward to it. And like I mean, I still think that I have a playoff chance, but I'm just gonna laugh if all my losses just generally happen to be against my division. And I don't know if that we take that into account in the future or whatever, but I find it to be very funny to look at. You said division, so I looked.
It is. Let's jump into the second matchup I want to look at, which is actually James and Kevin. And yeah, we're going down the list. But I started with James for our matchup, Nabil. So Nabil, what are you looking at between James and Kevin here as your key for their match?
How Chubb looks coming off after COVID as well, right? We've noticed that I feel like the performance, a lot of these athletes have not always been that great. And that could just be like ramping right back up, right? Like they had to hard stop because of the rules that the NFL have and like mentally preparing to kind of get back in there. But I mean, overall, they're going against Detroit in a game that they'll likely get up ahead. I'm saying that thinking that Baker Mayfield is good. And he right after OBJ was shipped off, it looked like, oh, that was all the problems. But last week he just looked like trash. And so, if he figures it out and trying to prove everyone wrong, Detroit gets ahead early. Chubb's just probably going to rack him up. And I think Kevin is also, I was talking to him yesterday. He feels like he still has a shot. And so I don't think it's going to be an easy one for James to necessarily squeak out a win. Projections are what, the second highest total game. Mm-hmm. So this should be a good one.
Yeah, James, what are you like hoping to cut? Like, going into the week, what are you hoping for? Like, one or two players make certain plays. Who is it that on your roster that you're counting on?
Yeah, I think besides Chubb coming back from COVID, it's hopefully Hopkins, first of all, plays, and second of all, plays the whole game and is just a target machine and scores. It sucks that I have to go against Dylan the week after trading for
Aaron Jones,
and now he's out. Embarrassing. Sorry, Aaron Jones, if you're listening to the pod. And then I can't believe I'm mentioning his name, but I'm really hoping that Flacco and Elijah Moore have that connection on Sunday. Because he's kind of heating up, but that was with Mike White. Two quarterbacks that do not deserve mentioning on this podcast after forgetting Aaron Jones's name.
Super Bowl champion Joe Flacco.
Super Bowl champion Joe Flacco. So yeah, it's kind of just general health at this point for my team, and hopefully people not only play but don't play 5 snaps and then are out.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and Swift's always a question mark for you too, right? Like Landry's been on and off like all season for me, like in different leagues. Like I feel like it's just general health on your side. Does Tennessee blow Houston out of the water like they should too? And do they do that by Tannehill getting a few, deep passes or at least some touchdown throws? You could be putting up a big number there. And I'd say on Kevin's side, it's like the biggest question is, does Dylan just slot right back in to that RB1 slot? Like it seems like the Packers do when Jones or whoever goes down. Like it feels to me like the Packers are kind of like the Steelers in that whoever their running back is, like that's their running back, whether it's the starter or the backup. So does that stay the case for Dylan? Does he get a lot of touches? And then Brandon Ayuk projected at 13 feels like not wrong, but I just don't think that's like, it's probably a good average, but I feel like there's no way he finishes within 5 points of 13. Like he's going to be under 8 or over 18. Like it's going to be a really like, is Ayuk back? And if you look at his production over the last few weeks, the only 5.6 fantasy points, just because it's a little bit of lack of yardage, but 3 catches on 4 targets. The Niners ran the ball a ton against the Rams, So it's understandable that his target count drops from the 7 and 8 it was before, but the 2-point conversion play, he got a touchdown. Jacksonville is not as good as the Rams. Does Ayuk become more of a bigger part of the Niners game plan where 13 is just under projected, or does he regress back to where he was earlier? That's two things I'm looking at as far as your opponent goes. Like, which way does that break, the Dylan and the Ayuk thing? Like, if it breaks towards neither of them really have much fantasy impact, like it could be a cakewalk for you as long as you stay healthy. It's gonna be super interesting though either way. Because Nabil, we kind of were talking about this before. Like, is this a must win for Kevin, or do you think there's a chance he loses, then runs the table and still makes the playoffs? Like, or is this basically like, this is it?
I think, we were talking about this. Keep in mind, Kevin is in 10th,
right,
at 4-6. Everyone else, I mean, James is at 9th at 5-5. So everyone else is sitting at 5-5 and 6-4. And those teams are good enough to at least win 2 more. So if Kevin does not get a win here, and having talked to him, it seems like if he doesn't get this win, it's a fire sale, which we are all getting to a moment. And, I've even thought of this. Have I missed my moment to sell at my highest? Because some teams are already so saturated with good players and they've already sold so many picks. What value are you really getting, except for if you have keepers? And so you might as well just save those to potentially get keeper value for, more value later, just as we kind of see how the entire NFL season ends. But one thing I want to bring up, and I feel like we talked about it last year when we started doing this, but we are starting to hit the winter games, right? And one thing that I think is interesting, just looking at the 2 rosters, are that, and sorry, I'm going back to James Kevin game,
of course,
is that Kevin's playing for the high floor. And that's kind of how I've been playing this season, with just 3 running backs in my roster at all times, just to try to get as many touches, because touches are points. Whereas like James, you're sitting there with like, you're hoping that Elijah Moore kind of goes off. The unfortunate part is like looking at what the weather situations are in this game. It looks like there's supposed to be a lot of rain, and they aren't in any locations with domes. So like, all of that's going to factor in. Both Tannehill and Allen in bad weather, they're both great runners. So that's probably where we're going to have a safer floor there. But I would only lean Kevin, not to like just pile on to the losing for James, but he is sitting with a higher floor situationally. And so I just think it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I think it's exactly what you're hoping for, is those blowups from Elijah Moore. And then, hopefully Chubb comes back, full swing.
I will add one more, especially since you pointed out the weather. There's one more key position, really, is like, who do you trust more kicking in the rain? Justin Tucker or Randy Bullock, who's not had a bad season, only 2 missed kicks and nothing since week 5 or since week 4. But like, they're both going to be in cold weather games and raining games. And that's easily a spot where Baltimore might get 3 or 4 field goals. Does Randy Bullock actually get that many attempts? I don't know. Do you want Randy Bullock attempting a 50-yarder in the rain? No. Do you want Justin Tucker kicking 50 yards in the rain? Yeah, sure. It doesn't matter. So yeah, I feel like your higher floor comment is accurate. James, any last comments though on your match before we take a move on?
I just won't stand for the Bullock slander. He's team captain and he's going to have a huge game.
Fair enough. Let's move on to another matchup between 2 teams that are currently in playoff position. Obviously incredibly pivotal with both of them at 6 and 4, Drew and Travis. But pretty low projections. Also looks like Drew hasn't actually updated. He's still got Higbee in there at tight end. Does he even have a second tight end on the roster?
Some people are offering him trades, but yeah.
Does not look to me like he's got another tight end yet. So we'll figure out if
he's got a tight end, but he doesn't have a player.
He doesn't have a tight end that is going to play a football game this weekend. But yeah, either, you know what, Nabil, you know, we're going to James first. James, thoughts on the Drew Travis matchup? What you're looking at, what it means for the league?
Well, in my case, I really would love a Travis loss to get closer to the top of the division, that would be huge. I think Damian Harris is a big question mark for Travis. He's been lighting it up, but having been out in the crowded room in New England, like kind of someone produces each game. So is
Right.
Harris going to be back and be the leading rusher that game is big.
Hope so.
Yeah, and then also like is Tyreek back now that Mahomes is looking like Mahomes again? Because that could be
Right.
6 points, or that could be like 36 points. Those are big ones for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna add just I love that just the way it worked out. The three of us ended up in all three of the divisions, because for me it's just like I hope Drew loses, because it'll just make it, it makes my path towards the division title that much easier. Win or lose against Nabil. If I I don't want to have to fall a game behind Drew to make that up. That would not be fun. Nabil, your thoughts on the match?
Yeah, I feel like, well, with Drew, I was kind of hoping that Hunter would have actually given him a little bit of a spanking last week. And unfortunately, that didn't happen, because I think he's one of those that the point for situations much lower compared. So I think he's one of those teams that he's got a record that doesn't necessarily match his performance. I said it on throwing heat, throwing smoke. But I have to say it. I say it to a lot of people, behind closed doors and stuff, but like Travis has figured out a way to optimize his team. So it doesn't matter what you look at there. You might see that he has two tight ends. Sure, he can maybe even trade to Drew, but in the end, he makes the right decisions to help him win here. I think it's going to be interesting with Harris in there. He kind of got hurt by Patterson going out, because I think if you're going to look at a player that's been pivotal to his success, it's been Cordell Patterson. And so, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a close one. We know that there's at least a 6-7 point swing, just because, Drew will pick up that tight end, but it's still close. And it's funny to look at those projections and see that those are the people who are in 6th and 4th, while, James and I are projected near 130s, and, we're at 8th and 9th. And so,
yeah,
it's going to be a slugger for sure.
Past performance has not necessarily indicated your future projections this year. It's definitely going to be interesting. I feel like my guess is that this will actually not end up being close, because I feel like both of them have rosters that either are like someone's going to either blow up, like it's going to be like a 35 point game for Hill, like James mentioned, or a 5 point game. And I feel like one of these guys is going to end up in like the 130s. Another one's going to end up like 80s, 90s. Like, I don't know who, but it just kind of has that feel of like, oh yeah, like this should be a close game, even though like they're both projected around the same, but it feels like one of them is going to be under projected. Just don't know who it is yet. That's my thoughts. Anyone else? Last comment on Travis versus Drew.
I think DJ Moore and just like the Carolina offense now, it's just doesn't feel that common that there's like a major quarterback shift this late in the year that makes you be like, all right, I need to reevaluate every player on the team now, because they were not looking like valuable assets. I picked up Robbie Anderson hoping that that's a lottery ticket, but that's probably a stinker. But like DJ Moore could go off for a ton with Cam behind center. It's just, I feel like we talked about like the injuries so much this year, but I feel like it's also just like because guys are at like teams don't have as much of like a rhythm each week. And so like Stephon Diggs, like Tyreek Hill, not only are people missing time, but like their week to week inconsistencies seem so different than previous years, where like there's not just like the top guys pumping out 15 plus points each week.
And it's not like they missed training camp this year or anything like that too, like, and everyone kind of attributed that last year, like there was more inconsistencies, like, oh, well, training camp didn't happen. And but it still feels like maybe there's still kind of a hangover from that. Like maybe just like a year of not playing as organized. I don't know, like the whole world was just kind of topsy-turvy for a while. Like maybe it's affected it, but I feel like yes, like there's been a lot of reevaluation, a lot of just like adding in a former MVP to into an offense at week, what is it? I'll go 11, like, or week 10 he got added. Like that's not normal. That's not normal. So definitely something to keep an eye on.
And just
Go ahead.
last point, not to go back to it again, is keep in mind he's playing Jordan Howard, who's been under projected, but I wouldn't be shocked if you saw moves before Sunday.
Yeah,
from Drew, because if Drew is serious about taking a title, you can't look at his bench and see that this is a team that can win it all with little to no consistency at the RB. For the same point that I made earlier, your running backs are almost your highest floor players. And so trying to find people who get guaranteed touches, that's how you win titles. Not that I guess I do know from like years past, but it's been a while.
It's been a while. I feel like it's been almost well, I guess James, you're the most recent champion out of the three of us, but it's been 7 years since your name got etched on the Splatty Keg.
Yeah, I think I've won multiple times since you've last won, Nabil.
Okay, one of them was the final that we were both in.
Devonta Freeman knows way too well about the floor that running backs bring to a team.
Moving right along, the one of the two matchups with someone who's been tanky completely, so we don't have to talk about the match for too much. With Tevin trying his best for the 2022 season, Antonio just overtook Hunter for the points lead. He's, I want to say, like 10 to 15 ahead of Hunter, and maybe another 30 to 35 ahead of me. We can verify that in a second. Obviously Devin's playing for next year, so I don't necessarily want to talk about his team too much, other than thank you for trading me all of your players, Devin. But looking at Antonio, just took the lead for the points race. Is this a week where he makes good let's say, what do you project him to get at? It's 125 from Yahoo. Like, does that seem low, fair, or high? How is Antonio going to do in the total points race?
Well, I mean, he's missing a kicker on bye. I think the hard part here is just he's gonna get likely a bye week. He has another one of those strong teams with a lot of consistency, and so it doesn't really matter who his matchup is. He's probably going to put up something like 120. I mean, even with a bad week, most of his players, I would actually say, relatively slot in where I think they would be. Maybe Deontay Johnson is a little high, but I mean, I can't look at his players and say none of them are believable. I mean,
I'll add into right now, it's 4.77 total from the kicker and defense slot. He will have a different kicker. And my guess is he's not going to play a defense playing against the Bills. So that's probably going to go up in projection as well. James, your thoughts on projecting out Antonio's week?
Yeah, I think the Steelers-Chargers game is big. Like, if Herbert, Allen is kind of back to normal, and then who knows what's going on with Pittsburgh. Like, if Big Ben is gonna play, like, they just seem like such a mess of a team, but like hopefully he gets a lot of targets if you're Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, and Zeke is back, right? Like, Pollard's obviously been getting a lot of touches still, but like Zeke still, like, with the 2 touchdowns last week were huge. I feel like they're going to start relying on him a lot. Antonio's got a hell of a roster, and really at this point, it's not necessarily about having like a big boom week for him. Like, if he can average 125, 130 the rest of the way, like, that total points title could be his. I'd say the 125 is going to end up being low just because, like I said, that this is probably going to get him closer to a 138 projection all said and done. And I feel like that, like, 140 range seems totally reasonable. So good luck to you, Antonio, but also I hope things turn around and I come take you down. The last competitive, well, maybe not the last competitive matchup, actually. The last definitely should be competitive matchup to look at. Spencer and Hunter. Hunter, I asked the question, is it inevitable that he ends up in first place with the 1 seed? Looking a little less inevitable. He does have to win out or only drop one and keep, and retake Antonio for the lead. I think he can do it. So inevitable, probably not the right word, but inevitable for a bye, maybe. Nabil, what's your thoughts on the Spencer Hunter match?
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to actually look at right now is surprisingly low on the transactions that I feel Hunter could have been making with such a hot start. I'm looking at some of his like random pick swaps with Drew and some other things, and I feel like he could have used that time maybe to pick up, I guess he picked up Cooper Kupp and Terrace Marshall early on in the year.
Kupp was before the season started.
Right. And so I'm just trying to look, and it's like having known, the more I look at it, having known that he had such a strong start, there haven't been as many trades to set himself for a title. And I think this is the one thing, maybe he's listening to the advice that we gave him at the beginning, right? Like, don't go making crazy trades and throw your team away. He's feeling pretty consistent with his squad that he can put out. And, I was talking to Kevin about this as well. It's like, if you have 2 quarterbacks or 4 running backs, you have none, right? Like if you don't know who you're going to have to start, sometimes it makes that much more of a chance of you making the wrong decision, right? Like if you play your studs and your studs don't perform, whatever. And so maybe Hunter's content with sitting with that. And he has depth there. Obviously this is a tough week because he has 2 Rams who are sitting out. But hopefully he feels that he has enough depth to take him, into the playoffs. I feel like Spencer has been unlucky. I think he's another guy who's got a great squad that he just doesn't get all of them to hit at the right moment. Hopefully Barkley is that little bit of, again, a solid floor, which will be the theme of my day today. It's just running backs are solid floors, but I don't know if we can trust that coming from the Giants, who oddly have a Monday night game. But
yeah, James, your thoughts?
Yeah, I keep waiting for the inevitable McCaffrey trade, and I feel like Hunter is someone who might be in on that. But yeah, I think this matchup in particular, like Spencer's got a lot of like scary boom guys, like Brady coming off a loss with the Evans stack. Like that could be a 5-touchdown game. Debo is the best player in the NFL right now, so you never know what he's going to do. Saquon could come back. Like Pittman's been like with Kupp on bye, this could be a great opportunity for the league to get one closer.
Yeah,
to Hunter.
James only spitting facts over there. A couple of things jump out to me. One, it could be a super fun chase on Monday night with Brady and Evans going for Spencer, and it looks like everything wraps up in the afternoon slot for Hunter. So we'll have a pretty good idea of what the chase is, but there's kind of no way that Hunter won't have a lead after Sunday. So it should be pretty fun. Is it a thing where it's insurmountable or seemingly insurmountable, and Spencer needs 50 points, and if they don't score early, it kind of is over by halftime? Or
maybe it's the thing where he's going down by swing.
I'm talking about if it was Brady
No, I know. I think that's insane. On Monday, he's going to be. Let's just say
down 50. He could be it could be down 50 and still
something points behind,
and still be in it, and still legitimately be in it. Like that could be really fun. And Brady coming off a loss in a game that they 100% should have. They had a bye week go and we're playing a Washington team that had lost 4 in a row. Like I made it 10 weeks, made it into week 10 of the ESPN Eliminator League, like the Survivor. You got to pick one team.
Mm-hmm.
This is the farthest I've ever made it, and I got knocked out because of Brady and the Bucs not being able to get it done against Washington. But yeah, there's no way that they lay a goose egg like that again, right? Like there's no way.
There's already chatter by analysts saying like, "Oh, has Brady lost it?" Like, don't ever do that. I listen to this one sports radio. They always say like, "Hey, I care about you. Don't say anything bad about Tom Brady. He's gonna play until he's 75. It's gonna happen."
And then the other thing too, like just about Hunter's team and season, I want to point out, like his bets have paid off. Like McLaurin has scored well when he needed him. And like, I'm pretty sure he didn't like play him in these slots where he had like low point outputs. He made the move for Cup, which ended up just being awesome. I'm pretty sure he got Freiermuth at the right time for, like Hunter's made the right plays. He's done well to get himself here, but I don't know if he has the better roster at this point without CEH fully healthy and without Cup in the game specifically for this match. I think if Cup is playing, Hunter has the better roster over Spencer, but it is now the bye week for the Rams. And I think that gives Spencer that. I mean, Yahoo agrees, and projections from ejections, but I think Spencer has the better matchup now. If this was in a few weeks in the playoffs, I'm taking Hunter all the way.
Yeah, it'll be, like I said, I think it'll just be interesting to see if there are any moves by the end of this week as people inevitably prepare for what is to come. Because I don't think, I keep saying this, there's not too much separating 1 from 10. And so it's not going to be easy. This is like the one season that, I mean, we are not athletes out there playing the game, but like we are going to be like throwing bows, and it's going to get scrappy towards the end, even if it means, and I will fully admit that my trades are probably going to lead towards people I want to see win a title if I do not win this week. And so I think it could be very interesting to see how it all turns out at the end of this. And I think this week is the one that we're going to look back and we're just going to, I think we could tell who's going to take maybe not the title, but get into the playoffs and go on a deep run.
It's easy to say this every week, but this really is the most pivotal week of the season. Like, this is it. This is the last week before we go into division matches. Like, this is kind of like, this is going to be the line in the sand drawn for like who's in competition for a bye. And, we already said Kevin's basically in win or go home mode, and who's going to have that inside track going into the division matchups with a 7th win potentially already in the books. When right now it looks like 500 might actually not be enough to get you in, according to the current projections, the way that Yahoo's got it set, like shaken out. James would actually be 7th at 8-6. So wins are going to be incredibly important, especially with 2 teams completely throwing in the towel. This is it. This is the most pivotal week for sure.
And I think a lot of that is attributed to, as I look at the actual matchups and the rankings between them, with both Drew and Travis at the 4 and 6, or they're both at 6 and 4, but one's at 4th, one at 6th place. And then Spencer and Hunter both at one at 6-4, the other at 7 and 3, but sitting at the 1 and 5. Those are like, we are going to say this again if the ones who are the higher ranks lose, because I think what that's going to do is it's going to throw that balance right back into being all clumped together. And so having 2 games like that, so maybe this isn't the most pivotal, but you want to be the one that's on the right side of history on this week. So
absolutely. Last matchup to look at, it's the match of the Ryans. It took us all the way to week 11 to finally get it. Ryan Rocha, obviously not exactly fielding a competitive team. My guess is he probably doesn't have McCaffrey on his roster for this game. Maybe he does, and maybe like he holds out one more week because this deadline, isn't yet. But James, your thoughts on this match looking into next week between Hoyt and Rocha?
Yeah, if Hoyt doesn't win, I think his season's over. The locker room's going to be lost. I don't think you come back from a loss in this matchup and have the morale for a playoff push. It's that simple.
Yeah. Nabil, your thoughts?
I'm looking at his schedule, and Hoyt has this, he's so unlucky, and for some reason not being able to round out the end of the season. Sure, he's gotten some wins, but before this last win, he was on a 3-game losing streak. And then, of course, week 6, he crushed me 166 with an amazing performance, and I thought I had it being comfortable at 120, which we always say is enough to win. But you look at the rest of his performance, other than a couple big games. He's just been really unlucky on a team that I think was pretty good. And I think that we talked about, and I don't know. I feel like he can't get a break where he starts off really strong. And then unfortunately, at week 4, he was 3-1. So of course he's going to feel on top of the world. And he just, for some reason, can never carry that momentum. And yeah, I hope he wins.
It's the same.
He's going to need it. And he's just going to, unfortunately, be the butt of jokes if he can't get outright here.
Right, it's the same thing every year for Hoyt. Like Kamara's been on his team for 4 years now, and he's yet to make the playoffs with Alvin Kamara. Sorry, I can never remember how it's pronounced. Looks like Kamara is on track to play this week, which is going to bump his projection up quite a bit because it'll slot him in over Ingram. But Hoyt does have the handcuff, so even if there's a setback there, you got to imagine that he's set with the New Orleans running back. Yeah, I like the morale play though, James. This is it, right? Like if you're Hoyt and you've got your 4th year captain Alvin Kamara on the team, and then he's never made the playoffs. Like we've already talked about how Kevin is in win or go home mode, but he's also at 4-6. At 5-5, you're not necessarily going to go home, but if you look at all the matchups, right, so either myself or Nabil is going to stay ahead, or I'm still going to be ahead if Nabil does win because I've got enough points. Or even with the loss, you're not catching me. Someone's making this one. Someone's making moving ahead of you by 2 games here. Antonio, this is it, Hoyt. This is it. You got for Hoyt's sake, I am definitely rooting for him to pull this off against a team that is clearly not, like Devin, trying his best for next year. So I'm rooting for Hoyt to win the match of the Ryans, because it would just be so sad if he was just already basically knocked out of playoffs again going into all the division matches. James, anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think exactly. Looking at the remaining weeks and who you're playing, this is a freebie. You got to have this one. They don't get easier. So pulling for you, Hoyt. Maybe after this year, Kamara's off the roster and he just goes on a 5-year run and destroys Flatty League.
Isn't it nice to think hey, we might be able to draft Alvin Kamara next year? Maybe I haven't traded away a number 1 pick yet, so I have a shot. But yeah, let's take back one more look then at the standings. We talked about this. We danced around this a little bit here and there. Talked about how compacted everything is, especially the slow brew division. But just kind of looking at the standings, looking at the matchups that are coming up this week, and you next week or the next 3 weeks after, you're playing your division opponent, so you can kind of actually tell who everyone is going to play the rest of the way out just from this screen right here. Just kind of what are your thoughts about where you are personally and where the league is? I'd love to hear from both of you, and I'm going to have my own thoughts on my team as well. And hey, if you want to make a guest appearance on the show, call in, let us know, because apparently Nabil's dropping. So James, I'll let you go first. How are you feeling about yourself and the league at large?
I've been thinking about this a lot. I forgot to mention it last week, but I'm really happy not to be in the slow brew division, because I think there's a huge advantage to be in one of the 2 divisions with a tanking team, because the division matchups, those 4 are going to beat each other up, and hopefully they all lose a game here and there, and I can sneak into the 6th seed with just 1 week where I'm playing Devin, where they're playing each other and beating up on each other.
Yeah.
And then I think it just is really going to come down to if Travis could lose this week in his matchup with Drew, and then I could take him. That helps me a ton. I've just kind of, everything needs to fall right. My roster cannot stand one more injury.
I feel you there. I'm feeling the same way injury wise. I made the big trade for Kittle. I made the big trade for Adams. Bolstering the quarterback depth that I had with Stafford definitely helped me for 1 week. For me, it's I almost don't care if I lose this week against Nabil. I do want to win, obviously. I want to make the playoffs. But more importantly, like I'm just hoping that I get another like big week where I put up like a 130. You know, like if you look at my season history, like started out really strong, like with a couple of, you know, under 120s being the only bad things for the first 7 weeks. Since then, haven't broken 110. Like I was leading the league in points for a reason. Like it was the consistency of getting up those like 130s. That's all I want. Just get back on that track, get back in that hunt for the, you know, if I lose because Nabil puts up 150, but I gain ground on Hunter and Antonio, maybe even past them. Great, cool, perfect. Like I should get a win against Ryan next week. I would hope that he does not have McCaffrey on his roster. Hell, maybe I'll have McCaffrey on my roster. The rumor has it those talks are ongoing. But for me, it's like I'm, as far as wins and losses go, like I'm much more concerned about next week. If I lose to Nabil now, it's not the end of the world as long as I put up a good score. But then if I also blow it in that like that gimme game against Rocha and I'm looking at 6-6, like now I'm sweating. Now I'm not happy about it at all, but I'm feeling pretty good that I'll be able to get at least a win there next week. I you know, sorry, Kev. Hope I'm kind of fingers crossed that you're in sell mode by the time we play again too. And yeah, like I'm not in that slow brew division that is 4 teams that are all still competing, which is a good feeling to have. I just want to throw out there before anyone wants to, you know, kind of shit on divisions. That happens every year. Somebody gets those extra games at the end of the year against the teams that are no longer in competition. Now it's just easier to visualize. Nabil, your thoughts on where you are and where the league is as a whole? Welcome back.
Yeah, I don't really know. I am on a company like mini computer, and so I don't know if they schedule update time, so my computer completely shut off. So I'm sorry I missed whatever you had to say, James. But I think to what you said, like I actually looked at it, and while it's easy for me to look at those 2 leagues that have 2 teams that are tanking, I don't think you can look at it that way for exactly that point. It just makes being in the slow brew division that much harder this year. And it was going to be a point that I was also making with Hoyt. Us 3 5-5 teams, we have to win, and we're all teams that I think can. It just makes going into at least the division stage for all 3 of us. Are we all? Well, I guess I share the same division as Hoyt. Hoyt and I will have the steeper incline to get into playoffs on the way back, just because we happen to be in what you could consider the more competitive division, just having to each play each other. So, you know, I applaud James for luckily also being in one of those that has a team that is selling it for this year, but in no means do I think it's easy for anyone, because what I've at least learned over the last 3 weeks, people could put up some stinker scores. A team that I thought is, well, again, solid. I've been pretty confident in my team. Like I put up 65 points, or I guess 74 points last week, right? And it can happen to anyone. Look at all the scores. They haven't really, there's been maybe 1 or 2 teams that have blown up, not much consistency and a lot of competition each week. So who knows? This is the one season that I'm just like, play my best players. That's all I can do, and sit and pray. You can be upset if you want, if things don't go your way, but it's just been a really good competitive year, and we've said it all year long. And so
yeah, it's actually that's a kind of a good what if to play. Like, what if all 3 of the 5-5 teams win this week? Like that'd be Nabil, that'd be you, James, and that'd be Hoyt down here. Like all of you are not playing. Like that would eliminate Kevin essentially. We've talked about that. Like let's just say like all 3 of those teams win. So there's 9 teams with at least 6 with winning records, with at least 6 wins after 11 weeks.
You'll have a whole lot of 6 and 5s.
Maybe a whole lot. Yeah, that would put me at 6-5. There'd be one of these 2 teams of Drew and Travis at 6-5. Most likely Antonio is going to win. So you got him at 7-4, a second 7-4. And then either, we've got another, 2 7-4s or Spencer at another 6-5. Like it's going to be, in the scenario where the two of you and Hoyt win, 9 teams with winning records with 3 weeks to go will be an absolute bloodbath.
And I'm excited. It's the first time we had division, so we get to I don't know, we can attribute it to that, but I think this might be the season that we talk about all the time, or at least the one that you can feel good about for 1 or 2 years until we all forget. Because I can't say that we've had this much parity before. I really don't feel like, I feel like we usually have 3 teams tanking by now. And yeah, I know we only have 2 now, but that's because I don't know. There's teams that, didn't have any good players, so they're not worth even buying players from. But us 3, if all of us 5-5 teams lose this week, the amount of goodies for everyone to probably go and grab is going to be crazy. And then, I guess at that point it becomes a buyer's market, not a seller's market, but should be interesting.
Should be really interesting. We're I don't know if we're running out of time, but we've been going on for a little while. So I do want to wrap it up. And I want to see, I know that James had one for me last week. I don't have anything ready for you off the top of my head. But I'm going to put you on the spot, James. Do you have a bold prediction for this week?
Bold prediction, your guys' matchup is going to be within 2 points. The final.
That is bold. Quite bold.
Final outcome.
Nabil, bold prediction.
I would like to stay with what I was just talking about. All 3 of the 5-5 teams get a win. And I also might say that there's going to be an upset from one of those bottom teams, which I guess doesn't really help. I guess that's the last place team. What is that?
So you're saying Devin wins? Like I said,
shit, I don't know if I feel that bold.
Are you going that bold that Devin?
I don't think I can go that bold. That team is trash. Fuck it. I'm gonna say. Let me look at his team. Let's see.
James did go 6 for 6 one time this year. That was impressive.
Nah, I'm just gonna. It's not that bold. It's pretty lukewarm. All 3 5-5 teams win, making next week the most important week in our league.
I feel like that's a pretty good. It's like what we said. It doesn't have to be outlandish, but it's got to be at least a 1 in 10 shot, right? That's probably within 10%. I mean,
good parlay.
Yeah, it's a good parlay. Yeah. My bold prediction. I'm gonna go back to that Hunter versus Spencer match, and the bold part of this is not that the fantasy match will be in doubt until the 4th quarter of Monday night. But I'm going to go ahead and put it out there that even though we just talked about how much the Bucks should come out and be the better team and win, it's going to come down to the 4th quarter for both Tampa Bay and Spencer, who are going to pull it out in the last drive of Monday Night Football. The Hunter will have a lead all the way up until not necessarily a touchdown from Brady to Evans, but my bold prediction is saying that the Bucks need maybe either to ice it in the 4th quarter with a little, maybe not necessarily come from behind to win. Maybe they're up 3 and then score a touchdown in the last 4 minutes to put it away. But it's going to come down to one final drive for Tampa Bay and the Bucks, and that same drive is going to be the deciding factor on Spencer versus Hunter. It's going to come down to the wire. I'm going to manifest it. I'm going to will it into existence. So I want another Monday night showdown between 2 teams who should make the playoffs. If Spencer gets the win, he's almost a shoo-in, but if without a loss or with the loss, he's right there in the thick of it with everybody else at 6-5. So definitely interested to see how this all works out. I'm going to go with Spencer to take it down on that last drive.
I'm adding 2 more to my parlay. I'm going to go ahead and say that Drew and Spencer also win.
Drew and Spencer also win out of the parlay. James, I feel like you went bold enough by going within 2 points. So thanks for making me pre-sweat it out between me and Nabil. obviously, the two of you stick around once I hit stop record, but I think that's all we got for now. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Subscribe.